That's true. Okay. Mandalas have been around for ages. I have a past life in Tibet, and let me tell you, mandalas were always significant in Tibetan history. Anyway, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Roni Reisler.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'm very, very honored and grateful to be here with you today. And I'm also very grateful for all the technological help I've received from Wendy and Penny, and may need to call upon you at any moment. But I have listened to all that you people have said about your inner experiences, and I would not be so arrogant as to say that I have had a similar experience in my own life. About 18 years ago, I did learn how to access the Akashic Records along with my sister, and we learned from a lady named Mary Parker. My life is different than my sister's life, and I'm one of these very earthy, show me type of people, you know? You have to hit me on the head to convince me that it's really going on. And so my inner development has been more about what is reflected back to me in the physical world and how that works. I also had a design background. My sister has a musical background. In the design work that I was doing, I did have some drawing classes, but I never perceived myself as an artist. I did design work. I did things with fabric. I did weaving. I did beadwork. I painted silk. All those kinds of things. But I never thought of myself as being able to draw or bring in shapes or do portraits and landscapes and things like that, which I always viewed as being an artist. So whatever I did with my hands and my creative energy, I felt was something separate from what my experience was working with the Akashic Records. And so what was going on there was I began to realize that there was something that wasn't really integrated for me in using the tool of the Akashic Record. So I began to explore this because I realized that the Akashic Records, or using the Akashic Records, is a tremendous life tool in a lot of different ways. You can ask your records for guidance, for information, for assistance in issues that you see coming up, in changing your decisions, making decisions. You can use it for a host of things in your life and in your inner development. And the bottom line of working with the Akashic Records is that you are enhancing, developing, and strengthening your connection with the divine, which many of you here have experienced in some way. So I began to use the records to give me instructions on how to do my little design work. I'd have trouble getting a piece of jewelry together, or something wouldn't work, and I'd open my records and say, okay, you know, how do I do this? What's going on here? And I'd sort of get some little inklings of, well, you know, do this first and then do that, and so on and so forth. And that was okay. That was working. But what was happening was it was going on from here up. I think some of you understand what that means, you know? Really, it's the mental body that's happening, and maybe a little bit of the psychic, but my heart still was not truly engaged. And as I was strengthening my work in the records, which that's a continual process, of course, throughout life, once one chooses back, I felt that was a lack, that there was something or some way that the two could be fused within me and something new would come out of it. I was aware of mandalas. My sister and I were very fortunate in having a very, cultural background. Our family always went to the Art Institute and studied art, and went to concerts and theater and so on and so forth. So they were not strange to me. And in the 60s, I did God's Eyes. Does anybody remember God's Eyes? Okay, well, those are mandalas, actually. So I felt that there was some avenue for me. So let's jump forward a little bit, and I'm going to ask everybody a question. Does anybody recognize this, or has anybody here ever seen this mandala? This is called the Sri Yantra, and it's very ancient, and you've probably seen variations of it because, you know, the designers or the constructors of this mandala sometimes choose different colors. This has been sort of modernized and put on a marble background. Usually it's a darker background, and if you'll notice, there's a little red dot in the middle of that mandala, which is called the bindi. And the purpose of the bindi is for the initiate or the adept or the monk, whoever is using the tool, to focus on that core center. And if you do that, you will probably see, or not, that it begins to oscillate or vibrate in some way. So the idea is that the mandala becomes a tool for altering consciousness. This is a great universal mandala because it represents as above, so below, all the integration of all the universes and realms. It's also communicating the Divine Mother. So it's a very significant and important mandala, and out of this comes other mandalas. But the primary use of it is the tool for those who want to expand consciousness and pursue inner development and connection with the divine by using it in itself and focusing on the center and meditating. That's frequently what mandalas are used for. They're also considered portals of energy, which this is also. This is a very, very powerful mandala. It is representative of a sound current of the divine and the light coming in. So it's a fusion of the sound and the light of divine energy. How many of you recognize this? Anybody? This is called the Kala Chakra. This is also a very ancient mandala, and it comes from the Buddhist tradition. This is the mandala that the Tibetan monks create in sand as they travel around the world every 7 years. And I think they were here in the Chicago area last year or the year before last. The interesting thing about this mandala is, if you notice, it appears symmetrical, right? If you look closely at it, you will see it is not symmetrical. It's balanced, but it is not symmetrical. And the reason for that is because if you look closely, you will see that the portals of the directions, which are those little T-shaped squares coming out, they're different colors. And within the chambers of the realms, which is what all that is, you'll see there are different deities and different characters. You'll also see that in the outer rims, there are different color selections. This one has yellow and green. This has blue and black. Up there, there's red and gold. So even though you appear, when you look at it, it appears to be symmetrical, it's really a depiction of a universe that has balance, but does not have perfect symmetry. And that's also about what we do within ourselves to develop. Are we balanced? Do we have perfect symmetry? No, probably not. They say that if you look at one side of our body and the other side of our body, they're really not matching. The one eye is higher, one shoulder is different. That's the reality of the physical being brought into the divine, and the divine being brought down into the physical. And that's one of the purposes of a mandala. This mandala is for peace. And that's why the Tibetan monks travel around the world to construct it. And they are trying to anchor the energy of peace in the physical throughout the world. And here they are. If you'll notice there that this mandala is very large, and all of them are focused on setting in the design bit by bit. It's very carefully constructed and drawn. The monks are typically in a state of meditation while they do it. And this is the colored sand down below. I have attempted to use that colored sand, and I have to tell you, it's really hard to use that stuff. So I have great admiration for the monks who execute this mandala. Interestingly enough, when this massive mandala is done, because some of these are almost 6 feet across, they gather up the sand and they throw it into the river after all the work that they have put into it. So they are aware in their communication through this divine portal that everything is transient. All things change and flow. When I realized that in some way I could use the Akashic records to create mandalas, I began to get images and information and sort of a compulsion to sit down and do things. And I went to a retreat, a teacher's retreat, with my teacher, Mary Parker. We were in this cabin in this lake area in Texas. It was just this little A-frame. We were all sleeping on the floor. And I went to her and I said, you know, I've been looking at these mandalas, which I've always enjoyed, and I feel as if I could use the records to do this. And she said, well, you know, why don't you try it? And she had a bunch of old stationery in a coffee table next to the couch, and she dug out this old paper. I mean, it wasn't really fine paper at all. It was just paper. And one of the other teachers who was there had a package of felt tip pens that she bought from Walmart. And Mary said, here's the paper. And the other lady said, here are the pens. Sit down, open your records, and do it. So it's really interesting how when somebody embarks on a journey, that there are all kinds of things kicked up about that. The fear, the judgment, oh my God, this is gonna look horrible. I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I doing this? This is crazy. But I couldn't avoid the images and the color and the signals and all the different things that were starting to come down and we access through the crown chakra. And really, you know, the heart and then the arms and then the hands. Now, this is a very organic piece, as you can see, and a lot of it has to do with energy flowing and exploding and interlacing and starting to move in and out. And this was one of the earliest mandalas I ever did, and it shows how the energy was starting to move through me, and the awareness of it was starting to come present with me. And I was trying to work with whatever came up and get it down and get it out. Now, mind you, I'm still walking around with the idea that I am not an artist. And I have only embraced the idea of being an artist within the last 2 years. I felt that I was a designer, and that's what I had learned. And so this was, even though I've scribbled stuff and done sketches, this was something new to me. I knew it was a mandala because I knew what mandalas were, but this was an entirely new piece for me. So this allowed me to make a decision, which actually, somebody gave me a book, and it was called Mandalas, Luminous Symbols for Healing, written by Dr. Judith Cornell, who traveled in India and has a doctorate in art and began to apply Eastern art to her knowledge. And she had a workshop in an ashram in the Santa Cruz Mountains of California. And it was a 6-day intensive where you literally worked in silence for 6 days and nights in a huge room that overlooked the ocean and the mountains. And you woke up in the morning, you did yoga, you took a vow of silence, and then you went into the room and you did the mandala. And I went to study with her because I knew that that would start to refine whatever was going on with me. As we started to work, this was some of the information that was given to me by Dr. Cornell. In light, which we're all working to familiarize ourselves with, and what we carry and hold within us, in light and in divine light in physics, the light ray, the white light ray, is actually made up of colors. And probably you all remember the anachrony, Roy G. Biv. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. When you put those together in physics, in light, they become a white light ray. When you put them together in the physical, in pigment, they become dark, they become black. So you're in the midst of a dichotomy that is constantly being integrated and moved and reintegrated as you walk through your life. You see the light is reflected back to you, it seems solid, this is dark, this is light. But we know within us, somehow, that where the point comes, where it's integrated, is what the true energy of our beings is. So our first exercise in the mandala class was to draw the light out of the dark. And this was what that exercise was. We began to blend the colors, the rays, the spectrum, which exists for us in our physical being, and gradate it out until it became pastel tone and then the white light. And that was the core of the exercises that she was teaching us to create mandalas with. In that class, we used only black paper. As I developed my own practice in the mandalas, I began to see that the papers I selected, the colors, had to do with the energy that holds the mandala for the individual. Our next exercise was to listen to sound, to music, because we were working with the sound current of God as well as the light of God. And so we had a variety of different sounds to listen to in music, and the idea was to take the light and put it to the sound. So we were to use the spectrum, and we were to use the light, and we were to surrender to the sound and the sound current that we were hearing. And we were now beginning to surrender to it, but form it at the same time. So this was my first exercise. I also had never used colored pencils before, so that was a new exercise as well. So this was some of the things that were being derived out of listening to sound and bringing light into that sound and combining it. Then as we passed through the class, a lot of fears started to come up. And it was fears, a lot of people who were in that class. There were people who never drew in their entire lives, all the way up to professional illustrators. So there was a broad spectrum of people attending the class. And naturally, a lot of judgment and fear came up. What am I doing here? I can't do this. I was sitting across from a professional illustrator who had produced her own children's books, and I'm sitting there going, "Oy, there's no way I'm going to be like this lady is." So our first exercise was go into yourself and find the symbols that will release your fear and protect you to move forward with your exercises and with your mandalas. This is actually what I consider my personal mandala now, and it is on my website. What's very interesting about this mandala is it's very shield-like. And as it came forward, I felt as if I was looking at the shield of David. I don't know that that's the shield of David, but that was my feeling of it. And I'm Jewish, and so the lineage of David is very strong with me, as it probably would be with many Jews. The sword, interestingly enough, my sister and I both wear this. It is a sword, and it was made for us. There are only 2 of them. When I did the sword, it didn't even occur to me that this thing was hanging around my neck. And then I looked down, and I thought, this is within me. Whatever I need here is within me. And so I can move forward with this and go ahead with whatever it was that I had to do in this intensive. When I returned from the intensive, I announced to a variety of people that I was now making mandalas, and I was opening the Akashic Records to do it. Now, in the class that I took with Dr. Cornell, I did not open my Akashic Records. And that was because she did not do that, and I wanted to capture the class purely the way it was taught. When I came home, I opened the records and I began to work. And a lady called me up and she said, I understand that you do mandalas. And I said, yes, I do. And she says, and you do them through the Akashic Records. And I said, yes, I do. She says, I would like a mandala. To this day, I have never seen this woman, and I don't know her, and I don't honestly remember how she came to me. Everything was conducted on the phone. I sent a permission sheet to her because we do not open someone else's Akashic Records without permission. And she sent it back by mail, and I did a mandala for her. Now, I know nothing of this woman, and here I am opening her Akashic Record and doing a mandala for her. And if you remember in the beginning, I said I'm one of those people who has to be hit on the head to believe that whatever's going on is going on. You see these little silver-like, and those are actually silver sort of petal-like shapes, and then the gray swirling shapes around it on the outer rim there. When she received the mandala, she called me and she said, oh my gosh, how did you know? Ganesh is my favorite god. And I said, Ganesh? And she said, well, yes, the elephant heads that you have all around the outside of the mandala. And it didn't even occur to me that that's what that was. The silver shapes just came to me to put that, and the scrolled shape just came to me to put down. Then, if you look closely, you'll see that the rainbows that are surrounding, this is not symmetrical, right? It's balanced, because the colors of the rainbow are interchanged in each segment, and there are some different colors in there. As I was doing a little more research on mandalas, I discovered that, and in fact it is in Dr. Cornell's book, there is a belief system in both the Hindu and the Buddhist systems that say that when you reach a certain level of mastery and your light becomes so refined that it goes beyond being white and becomes clear. And at that point you have what's known as the rainbow body, because you can see through the light and see all the constructions or the contents of the light, which is the rainbow. So here I am, making these rainbows for this lady. And I realized that at that moment, this was a real pivotal mandala for me, because I've never heard from this woman since. And it held all the elements in it that meant a great deal to her. And that was a very important thing for me to know, that what I was receiving and that what I was beginning to integrate with my work had a truth to it that was not only important for me, but it was important for other people too. So I started to see that there were things about this process that contained healing and contained heart opening and contained validation and support. Then people I knew started to ask me for mandalas. And this mandala is actually for the president of ARCI, and she's also a teacher of the Akashic Records. I did know something about this lady, and we are good friends, but I had no way of knowing what her mandala would be like. Her mandala has a consistent opening of the pink and green of the heart energy. And on the outer part of it, you see the holy or the sacred colors of the red and the gold and the orange saffron robes of the initiate or the monk. This lady is learning how to give darshan. I don't know if you know what darshan is. Mother Mira gives darshan. It's a projection of energy, of God's energy through the eyes. And she's training herself to do this. When I did the mandala, I didn't know that. She didn't know it either. But now these outer colors are starting to move in more towards what she is doing now. So we began to see that there was an element of moving through a journey from the beginning, from the core, from where the light comes in through the blossom and through the opening heart and goes out into the future. This mandala is also for a teacher of the Akashic Records. And it shows that there are many layers and levels to this lady. What is interesting about this is the next mandala that I will show you also has to do with the fact that all three people are teachers of the Akashic Records. And so they have, in that way, a similar practice. Yet, when you look at these mandalas, you'll see that they are very distinctive. So I began to see also that there was such a variation in the way this was coming through that I couldn't make it up myself. I really just wouldn't be able to have that many ideas without the support and the assistance of opening the Akashic Record. So this is the third teacher that I did a mandala for. And you can see that she's got a huge input of divine light coming through her. And there are three finer bodies within her that are working to be integrated. Now, this is an older mandala. This is about 9 years old. I have not looked to see if her mandala has changed. But despite the fact that there are some things that are being integrated, she has the green of the heart and the blue of the akasha and the purple of the loyalty and the clarity, and it's surrounded by the hearts and the lotus, that maybe some of those things in the center may have changed, but it's all infused with light. That was the most important thing about these things, is that everything about this is infused with light. And here are three people who are using a similar practice to improve themselves, go through inner development, heighten their connection to the divine, and their mandalas are so distinctive. When I was doing these mandalas, and when I do them now, I have become very aware of their healing power. Jung actually used mandalas for healing, and a lot of times he allowed his clients to create circular artworks because he felt that it brought through things that dwelled in the subconscious or had to do with something that was repressed or something that one of his clients wanted to express but was unable to because there were no words. So he was a very active user of the mandala. This mandala was created solely for the purpose of healing, and it had to do with a friend of mine who was undergoing chemotherapy and had a very, very hard time of it. And I saw the fire that she dwelled in through the records, and I saw how her heart was tightened and constricted because of the suffering. But I saw also that if she could stay with it, that there would be a kind of rebirth coming from her heart as it expanded and as she saw herself as a whole and beautiful person. And that's what this mandala is about. And the little fantasy butterflies that come out represented the joy and the healing and the transformation that she would experience when she allowed her own inner being to flow and mingle with the flame of the difficulty and open the heart at the top to become light infused. And she's very well right now. Thank you very much. She did well with this. This one, as I advanced in this was my birthday present to my sister, Eleanor Lieberman. And it's on the cover of her book, The Principles of Dynamic Manifestation as Received Through the Akashic Records. This mandala was challenging to me, partially because I am close to my sister and I wanted to be in a neutral state to really get clear information for her. The other part of it that was challenging is if you look at the upper quarter of the mandala, you see this darkened area that's cosmic, sort of cosmos, outer space is what I saw it as. And these bodies of energy coming in, but not really being defined, only the color, which represents the energy of it, is coming in. And at the time, I thought, I had a distinct feeling that it had to do with future that was still being created and that was not being shown yet. So the mandala has a very deep past lineage with the ancient goddess of Willendorf through the heightened state of the Egyptian consciousness, and then the Tetragrammaton, which is the Kabbalistic name of God, and then our swords came back again. And then this futuristic place where all things were still being formed. And that is actually what is going on in her life right now. After she wrote the book, there's been a huge amount of activity around her and her practice and the book. And we are both witnessing, the future being created right now in our lives, which is what we really all do, is each choice and each breath creates the next future for us. This is the last mandala I did. I completed it last month. The interesting part about this mandala is that I have been called to begin to use new material. And there's cut paper in this mandala. The shaman's rattles and the gold sun and the Amenhotep winged symbol are actually colored papers that have been cut out and applied. And what I began to see is that there were demands being made cosmically, more or less, that certain color and texture were very important, that they held an energy, and that if you couldn't somehow arrive at it by mixing a color or blending a pencil or whatever, that you had to get it somewhere. And so that's what came through is, cut the paper out, find your shape, put it on, and that's going to give you the color and the texture that you want. And that would hold the energy of the mandala. The center is actually gold leaf, and it was really important to bring out the light in this lady. She has a lot of very earthy practices that give her spirituality, which you can see from the shaman's rattle, and an old lineage of moving to source. The winged sun, which we usually associate with Isis, is actually older than Isis. It originally was found in a lot of old Egyptian tombs where the idea of having the sun as source and then becoming Ra and Amenhotep and Isis and so on came from that symbol. So it's a very old symbol of turning to source And of course, sunflowers always turn to source. They turn to source throughout the entire day as the sun moves across the sky. The sunflower changes the blossom position to follow the sun. So I see and I feel that the work's changing as I move and refine into doing it more and more and trusting what I receive and surrendering and moving forward into it. This last mandala was really a very big pivotal point for me and very significant. This is the mandala that I created for Mary Parker, my Akashic record teacher. It actually took me 2 years to do this mandala. And it wasn't because of all the detail, although the detail had something to do with my not wanting to work on it. When I began to see the images of Mary's face and the Buddha's face, I said, I'm not an artist. I can't do portraits. I don't know how to do portraits. And it would stop me. I allowed it to stop me. And yet there was a longing to complete this for her because Mary is growing older and doesn't do too much anymore because of health reasons. And there was a huge, overwhelming sense of urgency to bring this to her. And yet my own fears and my own judgments were stopping me from doing this. So I would do a little bit and I'd lay in some color and mix something, and then I would kind of avoid doing the faces, right? Because I'd say, I'm not a portraitist. God, please, don't give me something else here. I can't do faces, you know. But it wouldn't go away. That was very interesting to me. I couldn't find a shortcut. I couldn't change the image, and it wouldn't go away. And so, week after week, I would say, okay, I have to do some work on this, and I'd do a little something, and then I'd avoid doing what I was afraid of doing. And finally I said, all right, you know, just show me how to do this. I have to do this, and it's not changing. This mandala stayed the same in my vision for 2 years. Nothing changed in it. So, finally, I was given a way to do the face, and I worked one at a time on it, and I went, oh, no, it's no good, it doesn't look like her, it's this, it's that. You know, I was still going through my litany of stuff about it. And then the blue, the bright blue that you see here, that's actually cut paper. It was a very, very intense blue, shiny enamel paper, which I could not duplicate any other way. So that was also, you know, a compelling thing for me to do. It was a directive that's how I had to do it. I couldn't find that color anywhere else. Then we had the Buddha faces, and I went, oh, no, not more faces, please, don't do this. I found pictures of Buddhas. I traced the faces. What I discovered about this as I came into completion with this mandala is, one, I allowed myself to call myself an artist. Two, the techniques that I incorporated and that I used are not cheating, but in fact, great artists have used them. And three, that this was some of my best work and that I embraced it. And when I had it framed and sent to her, I knew that I had reached some kind of a plateau or level in producing mandalas that was going to propel me into a different consciousness or level in the work. So I do declare myself a mandala maker now, and I do declare myself an artist. And when I give a class, I tell people, Degas traced, Matisse scratched stuff out and put other layers on top of it and let the stuff show through. And he did it for years on some of his pieces. And they're in the Art Institute. And I thought, you know what? If they can do that, anybody can do that. All of you can do that. And I can do it too. And it is still part of creation. So I thank you very much for listening to my speech, and I would very happily welcome any questions or discussion.
I noticed, thank you so much. Beautiful, beautiful work, beautiful.
There seems to be a Mayan lineage attached to the prayer, which has been translated a few times from Mayan to Spanish to English again. And so the Mayan symbology was very strong, but Mayan art is very curious and very elaborate in some ways. That represents the belt of the chief. And the chieftain warrior wore a special belt to designate his position or office amongst the tribal leaders. And so that symbol that you see in this particular one represents her elevation, actually, the association of her positioning and her elevation in her practice. Mary is not a Buddhist and hasn't studied much Buddhism. She's actually a Mormon, but the Buddha that came through, I kept saying, well, she's not a Buddhist, you know, I was having this dialogue going on with the whole thing. It's her consciousness. The Buddha is her consciousness, not her practice. She has that compassion and peace within her. Also, the green Buddha can be Tara, who is also the female aspect of the Buddha. So it's kind of a unisex kind of Buddha. But the Buddha was definitely her consciousness and not her practice, because she holds that kind of compassion in her.
What does that fish mean in the middle there?
Repeat the question,
Right.
please. Repeat the question.
Oh, okay.
Keep it in.
Yeah, I'm curious about the fish in between those two symbols. And Jesus said, I'll make you fishers of men. Has that got anything to do with it?
Actually, that really could be, although that's not exactly what came out first. That's a really good interpretation, though. It's actually the Eye of Horus. And that eye is another one of those very ancient symbols that was carried through a whole Egyptian lineage of theology that sort of transmuted itself as the Egyptian eras changed. But what it essentially was the Eye of Horus. Horus was considered the god of gods. He was the overseer of the other gods. And so the eye held the idea that he could see all and know all. And that eye, or something similar to it, has shown up in quite a few of the mandalas that I have done in different formats. So there's something about vision and seeing that's associated with that symbol that comes in. But the fishing for all men is also very beautiful, because we're working with divine and divine consciousness, and that's just as valid as the symbol that I think I see.
Yeah, I'm a little interested in, you talk about the Akashic records and being able to, when you do a mandala for someone and you're looking at their Akashic records, how do you go from what you see into what you design and what you do? How does that transition happen? Are you getting it a little bit at a time, and then how do you decide how you want to display what you see and what you get through the Akashic records?
That's a really good question, because I've asked that myself, of myself sometimes. It's different for each one. And sometimes I open my own records first and say, okay, give me an idea of what is going to happen here. What color paper do I need? Do I need to get certain kinds of paints or pigments out? I have metallic things that I use which don't register on the computer, but you know, this pink tone is actually metallic, and the eye is actually gold, but the computer can't pick that up. So I get a message, or I get information coming in saying, well, you know, get some of this out, and you're going to need a blue background for this, and it has to be this blue, and then I'll get this image. I'll see the blue, but it's not in front, it's inside. It's the mind's eye, is how it works for me. I'm not saying it's going to work like that for everybody. Somebody else may get the information in a different way. Then I open the other person's records, and then I may see the whole thing. Sometimes not. Sometimes I see just one thing, and they say, okay, start in the middle. And I'll put something in the middle, and I'll go, okay, what's going to happen now? And then I'll get something else. Sometimes I've started on the outside. I have a mandala that was 5-pointed that had tigers' heads in it. And so I got an image of a tiger's head and got it on there. And I thought, well, I went through a similar dialogue about, oh God, you know, I don't do faces and all this. How do I do this, you know, with all the stripes and everything? And I got the instruction to start with the nose. So generally speaking, frequently portrait people start with the eyes. The eyes divide the face, right? And I said, the nose, you know, but I did it. The thing is to trust the information and move with it. And then whatever comes out is fine. If you go back later on and says, you know, lift this up a little bit, make it white, make it brighter, put something over it. That also will come in after or at another point. But I did it. I followed. I did the nose first. And after I did the nose, everything seemed to fall into place. So I just went with it. So sometimes I see the whole thing, sometimes not. Sometimes I start with just an inside rim, or sometimes, you know, I get the outside. Sometimes I start with the very middle. Sometimes I start with, let's say I start with those eyes first, and then put the middle in and color the lotuses. Each one has its own characteristic, but it's a real interesting exercise in trusting what you ever see or hear or feel to do.
Actually, Dr. here, can you tell us how do you open your Akashic records? Because I have my own way, it comes spontaneously, but I wonder how you do it.
Okay, she's asking if I can tell you how to open your Akashic records. Actually, we give classes on how to open the Akashic records, and I would not be able to do that here. We use what is known as the Holy Prayer method. My sister probably mentioned it to you if you happen to hear her speak. It is a particular kind of lineage that we follow. There are other ways of opening the Akashic records. Some people do it through visualization, some people have an incantation, some people just pray and ask. Edgar Cayce went into a trance. We do not go into a trance, although our consciousness is altered, which is, you know, my producing mandalas while being in the Akashic records is a witness to the fact that I have to be present and conscious while I'm working on this, although there are some people who do paint while they're in trance. So I'm still in an altered state, but still with my eyes open and selecting brushes and pencils and things like that. So if you would like to be on a mailing list for when we have classes, You can give me your name and email, and I'll connect with you.
I do open the Akashic records, but I was wondering how you do it, because each one has their own way.
That's correct. We have a group of people, the Akashic Record Consultants International. It's a site, and that is a particular organization that teaches how to access the Akashic Records in this specific way by using a certain specific holy prayer that Mary Parker was taught, and she is our founder and our teacher. So that's how I do it, is I use that prayer. So I consciously use the prayer. I open my records when I came here, before I began, and I use that prayer, and then when I am complete with it, I will close the prayer and close the records. After a while, when you do that for many years, you're usually in the records all the time, to varying degrees of depth. So we could talk about it later. Let's see, did you have a question?
I had the same question she
Oh, okay.
Just wanted to ask, do you give interpretation with your drawing?
She's asking if I give interpretation with the drawing. I do send a page, or maybe 2 pages, of the sense or the feeling or the reason for the color and the symbology when I send the mandala off. But it is really important for the person to look at the mandala and see or feel what they feel for that mandala. And the best example of that is the one I showed earlier with the little elephant's heads, where this woman really resonated, and it was all from within her. I really had no mental knowledge of what I was doing in that mandala for her. So at that point, I didn't really give her an interpretation. There was something about the 8-pointed star that had some energy, and the rainbows were important for her, but I didn't see the Ganesh in it at all. She did. So it became significant to her.
So then the person has to interpret it pretty much themselves? And then you get guidance from that as to your life or what you're to be doing?
Well, I do send something about it, and usually what I receive about it has to do with their present state of consciousness and the energy of their soul. It isn't about so much figuring out as it is to use it as a tool to meditate on and then feel in the heart what it means to them. In the way that we teach the Akashic Records, we embrace the belief that every moment is what creates your future. So we all are capable of making dozens of decisions right here and now as we're speaking, and that's what's going to create the next future that we walk into. So in our use of the Akashic Records, we do not use it as a predictive tool. We use it to see what is presently going on with us and how we can expand, develop, or release it, thereby changing our probabilities. We can see probabilities, but you may have, path A, path B, path C, path D. If you behave this way, there's a likeliness that this is going to occur. If you let this go and move into another state of being, maybe B and C might occur, and so on. So there is knowledge in it, but there is not a hard-hewn path.
Not like guidance, no.
There is guidance, yes, there is guidance. But it's important to understand that it also comes from within, it comes from your own heart. Any other questions?
Please don't go in the audience.
Oh, All right, I have to stay here, I guess.
Right.
Diane's directed me to stay here. Okay, I'm sorry.
You showed some of the mandalas where they had future balls, like your sisters, and
Yes.
The one with the 3 eggs or whatever in the center. Is the mandala supposed to be a point in time of that person, or is that supposed to be up to that point, or what are you representing in the mandala?
Part of the answer of that is something of what I said to this gentleman over here. First of all, frequently the mandala supersedes the time continuum. And I've actually had experiences where when I'm working on one, I have so completely lost track of time and been so far out of the time continuum that I've arrived at other places an hour late or an hour early, or because I just wasn't there. I lost track of time completely. It's different for each person. But typically, I could say that the mandala is being manifested for the person where their soul or inner development is at the time that the mandala is being constructed. Now, I've checked into that, and some people have said, well, that means you need another mandala later on. That's true for some people, but it is not true so far for others. One of the mandalas that I showed you, the pink one that had a beautiful blossom-like effect on the transparent layers, she asked for another mandala, and when I checked, I saw that that mandala was still appropriate for her now, 9 years later. I have another mandala in my collection, though, for a gentleman who I know is supposed to, if he wants or asks, is time for another mandala. So that may depend perhaps on inner development of the individual, what they need to know, how they're using a mandala, if they're using it as a meditative tool or an interpretive tool, or if they're investigating something within themselves. So I would say that each one is different. In my sister's case, because she's very actively connecting with the divine and frequently moves in and out of the time continuum in her work, that it was not surprising to have some very powerful interchanges of continuum in it.
The one of the person holding their heart in their 2 hands,
Mhm.
you said she's now gotten better.
Yes.
Would her mandala be substantially different at this point?
Most likely it would be. I have not asked nor checked. What was interesting about that one was that there was also a great sense of urgency to do it and complete it. It wasn't a particularly elaborate mandala to do for her. It was like, get it to her quickly because she needs it now. And I haven't asked and she hasn't asked, but that's a really good question, and thank you. I'll have to talk to her about it and see what she's in the mood for. But yes, I think that in her case, in that one, that was a very specific mandala for a very specific purpose. And to move into a greater sense of her being, most likely she would have a different mandala. She's a great animal lover, and that's a very, very pure energy for her, and something like that would probably show in her mandala. I'm sorry, yes.
What I'm trying to understand is the mandala is a communicating device.
Yes, it can be a communicative device, yes.
Who's sending the information to who?
It's simply what the information from the divine has sent through me as the vehicle to give to that person with permission. I have upon occasion made gift mandalas, and I do that through my own records and ask what is appropriate for this person for the highest good, always for the highest good. So there isn't a who exactly,
Yeah.
unless you want to include the divine
Well,
as a
see,
who.
we humans need a picture to understand the way our mind function. And this consciousness is beyond that, but in order to communicate with us, is visualizing energy into a way that we can understand it.
Yes, that's true. That's really what's
That's why I call
involved.
that a communication device.
Yes. Certainly the first two mandalas in the sequence that I showed are very strongly communicative devices, and they're also, if you stare at them long enough, they will alter your consciousness. Even if you stare at this long enough, it will alter your
This one will
consciousness.
take you way up to the 6th dimension.
Yes, but the lady for whom it is in at least that dimension or beyond. She's a teacher of the Akashic Records and has been through a very fascinating and interesting spiritual and physical journey. So your assessment of that is valid, absolutely very valid. And how many dimensions it really goes through, I'm not prepared to say that. I'm really a vehicle for it. Really a vehicle, and it's transformed me in a lot of ways working on this.
Yes, so it can also be used as a transformation device.
It is a transformation device. There's a really interesting mandala from a Tibetan sect where it's actually a very gory mandala. It shows a human skin spread out in the middle, flayed with skulls and blood and all of that sort of thing. And you look at it and go, ugh, what are they doing that for? But the principle of this mandala is that when the adept looks at it, the idea is to let go of ego,
Yeah. And
that the physical has no significance, and that this is all, transient, it's going to disappear. And, I imagine that the priest or whomever is the master of this adept would say, well, you've got some issues here, go look at that mandala over there on the corner. But it's a very old mandala, it's about 500 years old.
there's also a connection with the Mandela and the crop circles.
Very possibly, yes. Mandalas can be in many different media, by the way, and are through many traditions. The Native American medicine wheel is a very good example of mandalas, and there are also Kabbalistic and Islamic mandalas where there's script in Hebrew and so on. They don't like to have images so much, but that are also, prayer wheels and incantations and things. Wendy?
What is the media that you used for drawing the faces? Is that pencil?
Yes, it is colored pencil. I use the Barrel Prismatic, which are very soft. They're not pastel pencils, though. They have wax in them. But they do blend nicely when you work one on top of the other.
Okay, because that makes total sense. I was trying to decide if they were pastel or pencil. So
No, I'm
that
afraid of
answer-
pastels. I'm
that
afraid I'll
answer-
drag my arm with me. This mandala consists of colored pencils, ink pens, metallic pens, metallic light refracting pigments mixed with acrylics, cut paper, and a little bit of straight metallic and acrylic paint. So it is a mixed media.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm not very clear what these records
represent, okay, so I'm going to say what I thought I heard you say is that you say prayer or incantation or saying, and the vision comes to you for that person. There must be books that inform your knowledge and wisdom to guide you on these issues, or is that incorrect?
When you say books, are you speaking of physical books?
Yes.
I actually do when I open the record.
I don't comprehend.
Okay.
Talking
In the Old Testament, there is something referred to as the Book of Life, and it is Akasha is primary substance. It's the quantum field. It's the substance on which all things, everything, every thought, motion, breath, word, deed, development, creation is imprinted. We don't see it, we hold it within, and it transcends beyond us.
And this is something in the Old Testament that informs.
It's in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, and Akasha is a Sanskrit word. So it prevails through several different belief systems. So it is a means of divine information. And since I know someone, the lady back there said she's celebrating the New Year, in the Jewish New Year, in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we ask to be inscribed again in the Book of Life. We also ask that in that Book of Life, we are inscribed in the Book of Life for health, for love, for abundance, for generosity, for peace, etc. Health. So that would preclude that there are more than one book. A lot of people perceive this as a massive universal filing system in which all imprints of the universe are collected. And it's a divine action. So when I say the prayer that I use to go into the Akashic record, I am going into a segment of higher information and asking that it be given to me. How I do that in my process is the information, which is divine energy, comes down through the crown chakra so that I actually feel my head activated, the top part, and the energy comes down and is anchored in my heart. It's a very heartfelt process. The third eye sometimes is activated. I do not use my third eye. I work to get a direct divine connection with it. So what we ask for is higher information. It also comes from within us. We hold that within our DNA. We hold that divine creation within our DNA. So we're having that activated and then moves, and it transcends our physical being and meets or integrates with the divine source that's coming within us. So we're activating and elevating the divine within us to meet the higher source that created us.
So, I know nothing about this, so it's part of the Jewish belief system, Christian belief system, and who else? You said so.
It isn't exactly part of the common belief system. It's considered a more metaphysical or mystical part. It's a more arcane part of a system that probably has been used for a long, long time. And there are stories about how the Atlanteans knew how to access the Akashic records. The Mayans knew how to access the Akashic records. But what you're asking for is a consciousness expansion experience with receiving greater and more expanded information that is absent of judgment, that is pure and clear, and comes from love.
I think I sort of.
Well, it is like bodybuilding, believe it or not. When you learn how to do this, there's an element of strengthening and practicing until you start to begin to trust and allow yourself to go deeper, more deeply.
I have a real quick response because I studied shamanism too, and it's also the four directions and it's like the fifth element, Akasha. That's the name actually given to the fifth element.
Years ago, maybe 50 years ago, I went to a Akashic Records teacher for a reading. And she said she's reading from the Akashic Records. I had questions, things that I wanted answers for, and I was sitting and she was reading like this over my head for about a half an hour. And all things from way back. I don't know how many lifetimes back, but it was very helpful.
Yes, sometimes access to past lives comes up. Edgar Casey did that, but he also used his way of doing a lot of healing and getting remedies for people and so on. His approach was different than ours, but that's where he went, was to that consciousness.
He was a healer in a past life. They called him Rata or something. I read all Casey's books, you know. A healer, yeah. So that's how we came into healing people.
The interesting thing about the energy is when you start to use it, you are healed also. Sometimes just the exchange or being in the records or getting some information about yourself or whatever you're asking, there's a sensation of healing because it's a very loving energy. It's very supportive. It's open. There's no judgment. And if you have judgment coming up in you, which, you know, physical beings, come on guys, most of us have some judgment somewhere, when that's brought to your consciousness and you see that by taking that away, something will change, it's a remarkable piece of information. It can change a lot of different things.
Could you elaborate a little more about the Book of Life? Because every time that I take Polaroid pictures to the sun, I get this huge book in my door. Always the book, and then I ask, what is that? It's the Book of Life that everyone needs to have their name written in order to enter the door.
Well, that may be a very valid image. It is true that we are, if you choose to embrace the belief that we are written in the Book of Life, which isn't a Jewish premise, because we're all here. We're all here. And so somehow we are written in, and we've been written in to live another year, or we've been written in to come back. And that may be the journey. Right there is to live the life that God has given us and do whatever it is that we can do or will do or want to do.
But it's something very distinctive. I am of the Jewish faith, Christian Jewish faith. And I studied through Judaism, the Christianity, because it's another focus, totally different than just from non-Jews. In order to come to the roots of it. But the Book of Life is, as I understand it, from the beginning of the Exodus and how the Israelis went and related to God, not knowing how to relate to Him, and by receiving instructions, particularly through Moses, and how it developed and unfolded, and how we need to do the same. I see it as being in Exodus in a way, and then through all the things that we go out of the slavery and so on. It's amazing, but the Book of Life is very, very specific in Judaism.
It is. Also, the image that you saw could be associated with the initial tablets that were received by Moses. And in more mystical work along those lines, the legend or the story or the Torah states that the original tablets were actually carved in a sapphire blue, which is associated with the Akashic records, the blue. Sapphire being a very hard stone, not quite a diamond, but very hard. So you might be looking at that as well, and then there are a body of belief systems involving that. Now the idea that if you follow what is written on those sapphire tablets, then you are inscribed once again into the Book of Life. So there's a lot of interlacing, a lot of interweaving of all of this. Current information like Laszlo's books, the physicist who's written several books on science in the Akashic field, and he goes about proving its existence through quantum physics. So my personal belief is that when you get mention of things through such a broad spectrum of disciplines, that somewhere in there lies a truth. And through my own life experiences, I have seen that it's a remarkable tool and gift, and it has, for the most part, served me very well, and hopefully I serve it very well too. Yes.
Is there, I see that each mandala is like for a person, but could you have, if somebody was getting married, a marriage mandala?
I did do a ketubah mandala, and I don't write Hebrew. I had to trace each Hebrew letter around the outside of it. But yes, you can do that. I have a photo of it. I don't have. Oh, I think I do have it with me on a disc. But yes, you can do that. You can do it for a lot of things as a gift. You can do your own. I did several of my own at the workshop. That was the idea, was to begin allowing that energy to flow.
Can you show us again your mandala?
Which one?
Can you pass them? They are so beautiful.
Thank you.
Because some people came later.
Do we have time for that?
We have it till 5 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can. This whole PowerPoint thing is totally new to me. Here are the monks with their masks on, doing the sand work. Look how small that work is and how wide the mandala itself is. You can see in proportion to their bodies as they're kneeling over it to work on it, how intricate that is. And here is the Kala Chakra. Incidentally, I was talking to, oh, he's gone. We were talking before I began the speech that this kind of a mandala is sometimes done in 3D architecturally, and it's known as a stupa, S-T-U-P-A. And it's a circular structure, and then there are inner chambers that are elevated and also circular. And then if you look down on it from the peak, from an aerial view, you see something like this, only in 3 dimensions, and it's a building. And there are a lot of those in the Pacific Rim, Indonesia, Bali. Okay, that was the first one, the Sri Yantra. This is probably the most well-known mandala and one of the oldest. And you'll probably see it in a lot of yoga studios too. But it is the Divine Mother, the great sound current of the Divine. And it has the little center in it. Let's see if I can go. And there's the Kala Chakra, the monks. This was one of the first ones I did when the energy of the mandala started coming through me. It's very organic. That was a light exercise. That was the first one that I did in my mandala workshop while I was studying to create mandalas And this was my personal mandala to release fear. Happy New Year. I believe I have done over 50 mandalas. Are there any more questions?
Have you done any exploring with labyrinths and their connection with mandalas?
There is a connection to mandalas and labyrinths. And occasionally that opportunity has come, and I've really sort of passed it by, to be honest with you, partially because I feel very committed to this. And so I haven't walked a labyrinth, even though I've been invited. And in fact, the second mandala intensive I did with Dr. Cornell's assistant was on Whidbey Island, another 6 days, day and night. There was a labyrinth on the land, and some people did walk it. I did not. But you're right, there is an association, and it's actually creating the mandala within yourself as you walk through the paths that construct the labyrinth. And there is an association. It's also a very meditative process. And sometimes doing these is very meditative as well. Sometimes not, because I argue with myself.
Do you have a separate place in your home or a special studio where you do your work?
She asked me if I have a special studio or place. I do. I set aside a room that's, I call my art studio. Sometimes a lot of stuff winds up in there that shouldn't be there. But I have a table, and it's a big table, and I use it, and it's well lit, and I do need that space. When I went to the intensives to learn how to do this, we were each given a table, a whole 6-foot table. The space we were in was easily as large as this, and there were tables in a circle. And we put our mandalas down in a circle, radiating out. So not only were we creating our own mandalas, we were creating a community mandala by setting the smaller mandalas in. And each time we finished part of the project, because we did several different kinds of mandalas in the 6 days and nights, we would set them down in a circle and walk around them. So we were realizing the concept of mandala on a lot of different levels in that way. And now when I teach a mandala workshop, I work to do the same thing, because it's the circle of life as well as the circle of consciousness. Yes?
I dreamed last night something purple, like I do have your mandala, this one, like the Ladies and Utilities Association. I associate with my mother's mandala. I saw some figures, but no defined like I saw now on your mandala. But my mother is going to have surgery because she has a tumor, and I saw something like that, the SMB, she has the tumor in this area. So, but I saw the light over there, and I feel like that. It's not feel, it's like that. I see that it's going to be okay, and probably the Buddha and the other, they're going to be like a masters with the doctors in that surgery.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel in your heart that this was a good aligned symbol for you to hold?
Yes.
When is your mom having surgery?
By the end of this month.
The end of this month? Did you tell her about your dream?
No, I didn't see her today, so I didn't have time to talk to her. No, I didn't. Now is what I associate my dream with this. I didn't know before.
Don't you just love when that happens?
Yeah.
I actually am receiving a piece of information about that, if I may. The image that you held in your dream, you're remembering clearly, which is unusual for dreams frequently. So you're asked to bring that image that you saw it in your eyes and in your mind head, and hold it in your heart for your mother, and refer to it, and hold it with light, bring light into it and hold it, because you will embody the healing tool for her. Are there any other questions?
I just have a simple question. Just about, I know you mentioned that tracing is okay, you know. So when you get something very geometric like this, so I mean you have to somehow divide it equally into 7 points, and so you're using rulers and compasses and things, and that's fine, right?
Yes, in fact, a 7-pointed star is murder
I
to
can
draw.
imagine.
8 and 6, that's fine. But you are right. I go from corner to corner and corner to corner. That gives me my center. Then I separate the sides of the paper in half. And so that gives me an alignment with the center. So now I have quarters. What I actually did with the 7-pointed star is I went to our website and printed out the 7-pointed star that had been done computerized. And I enlarged it and then drew lines through it so that I had a grid. And I enlarged it on a copy machine until I had the right size and drew lines, and I transferred it onto, using the center that I had drawn in the middle of the paper as the guide to where I wanted the 7-pointed star. Once I had one star in place, I began to draw the lines outward from that basic star. So that's how I did it. Now, that's how I was directed to do it. I have no idea whether that's how something like that is done. I mean, I didn't learn it, yeah. So
Yeah.
it just,
It's fine. I agree.
It
And
worked.
it's all available that you can use will work, you know.
yes, absolutely. Whatever tool you have available to you is valid. Why not? We're all the same stuff. So,
Each one is so totally different.
yes.
Is that what every person's, is that part of their makeup, what they're like? Because you get a totally different impression from each one
Right. It's the individuation of the soul.
of the soul.
Right. So, well, I thank you very much. Thank you so much for your interest. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Roni. That was wonderful, just delightful. We are going to Ruby's tonight if anyone wants to join us over there on Skokie Boulevard. And don't forget, next month is Sharon Lund, and she's the person who died of AIDS and has a very strong story. So please join us then. Thank you for coming, and don't forget your trash.